So I was looking through my desk drawer the other day. I was looking for a permanent marker, a black Sharpie marker to make a poster or something like that, and thought I had one handy sitting out on my desk, and couldn't find one there. So I started looking all the usual places. You know, you get that coffee mug that you store pens and pencils and markers in, and I started looking in the desk drawer, and I started looking in the kitchen, that junk drawer where everybody keeps assorted stuff that should really go somewhere else, but you leave it all there. And my quest revealed I found one, and then another, and another, and another, and then I discovered I had a package I had already bought, another partially open package I had bought, and then at some point I had bought and forgotten about a multi-pack of different size Sharpie markers. This, of course, was after I had gone to the store and bought a new one. And it occurred to me in that moment, not only I need to do a better job of organizing my desk, but it occurred to me, this is how I have learned to function in life. When I can't find the thing that I think I want, no big deal. Just get another, and another, and another. After all, you can always get more. You can always buy more. And then, of course, when one runs out of ink, you pitch it and you buy another one because they are disposable. And there's always going to be more for whatever my need is. That seems like not really wise marker ownership, but I don't think it's just limited to markers. I watch sometimes when I'll say to my kids, go put on some socks. I don't have any socks, and they have lots of socks. But because they feel like there will always be more socks around, they're not very careful about how they treat the ones they have. And some, instead of being in the sock drawer, will be laying in a laundry basket or in a hamper or thrown onto the floor, unless somebody's doing a regular job telling them, please take care of the things that you have. Don't just assume there will be more handed to you, more that will be given. It turns out in life, the more and more and more we think we have an endless supply of stuff, the less we take care of what we have. In economics, they call it the law of diminishing returns. If you have one pair of shoes, you will take care of them because it's the only pair you got. The moment you get a second pair of shoes, it becomes easier to stop caring about them. I've got a backup pair, that kind of thing. And when it's objects, when it's consumer goods, there's a certain amount of truth to that, right? I mean, a marker's going to run out. This isn't an heirloom I'm going to pass on to my children or grandchildren. I'll use it. At some point it will run out, and I'll need to get another and another and another. But what shows me something has gone wrong is when I've got a brand new marker that's ready, but I discover I bought 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other ones that I had forgotten about because I just treat everything as a consumer product there will always be more of, and therefore I have no responsibility to take care of what I have. I want to suggest too, something terrible happens to all of us, but especially in the culture in which we live that we call the 21st century America, when we do that to relationships and to other people as well. I'm less inclined to take care of the people in my life that God has placed in my life if I treat them like one more object that I can replace when I want to. Oh, this is regular point. I wanted bold size. I don't care about this one anymore. I'll get the new one. Oh, I wanted a thin, narrow tip. I don't want the one that I have. It becomes really easy. I watch it in my kids as well. I don't want these socks. I want the other socks that I saw somebody else have. I don't want these shoes. I want the other one that I saw somebody else have. It becomes really easy then to treat people that way also. In a culture where everything is a commodity that is meant to be used, disposed of, and then replaced with another newer, cheaper, or shinier model, it's hard not to do that with other people as well. And it got me thinking, maybe this is where I need to listen in to some difficult but important truth-telling words from Jesus. This coming Sunday, we're going to be hearing a passage from the Gospels when Jesus is cornered by respectable religious people who are looking to try to make a point and trying to get Jesus on record supporting them. The question they come to Jesus with, this comes out of Mark's Gospel in the 10th chapter, they ask him, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? And Jesus' answer then, well, what's in the commandments? What's in the Torah? What do you have from the instruction that came to us from God? And they say, well, Moses has a rule allowing that a man can write a certificate of dismissal and divorce his wife. And Jesus' response is important for the way it calls out our tendency to do this. Jesus says, because of the hardness of your hearts that God gave this permission, that God allowed this possibility, and says, but God's intention in the beginning is that we be capable of permanent relationships where people aren't treated like they're disposable. So Jesus goes on to say, you know how the story goes back from creation. You know how the story goes in Genesis. God made them, and male and female, they're made, and they become one flesh. And what God has joined together, Jesus says, no one is supposed to separate. And then Jesus goes on to explain to his disciples, his position is, you're not supposed to divorce your spouse because it's like throwing somebody away. Now, there's a piece of me that just needs to let that land, because I'm someone who is married and am continuing to be married. I know lots of people who I deeply care for who are married, people who are single, people who are in relationships that are approaching marriage, and people who have come through divorce. And these are people who not only I care about, but I dare to believe the living Jesus cares about very deeply as well. And I want to be able to say, there are probably circumstances where the least worst option in front of relationships that had fallen apart was to end things in divorce, even though Jesus seems to give us a clear word, you're not supposed to do it. I want to suggest, though, it's really easy for any of us to let ourselves off the hook with a teaching like this if you aren't actively in the middle of marriage counseling or the possibility of divorce. It's really easy to take a passage like this from Mark and to say, well, those other people who are in the midst of getting divorced, those people, oh my goodness, they are really bad because they're directly contradicting what Jesus says. I think this cuts even more deeply. I think something even more essential is at stake here. Because even apart from divorce and remarriage, I think even more deep is the way all of us slide into this pattern of treating other people like office supplies that I don't really have to take that much care of because I can always get another, and there will always be another model on the shelf somewhere. And we do that, certainly, in those closest relationships in our lives, our marriages, our households, our children, our parents. It's possible to do that in any of those. And in a culture like ours, it's awfully easy to do that to everybody. Nobody really matters. I can always replace them with somebody else, right? I don't really have to watch what I say on social media because, if I upset somebody and they unfriend me, who cares? I'll find other people who already think like me, and then I won't ever have to face anybody who disagrees with me. Man, that's tempting, but that's people are disposable thinking, isn't it? It's so easy to treat other people around like they are replaceable rather than that these are individual, important people made in the image of God who are infinitely valuable to God. There are a million ways we treat people like commodities, like products that we can simply replace interchangeably. After all, one Sharpie marker is like any other, and therefore it doesn't really matter which one I have, which one I buy. These are basically the same, and to treat people like that too. And in our marriage relationships, the temptation, of course, is to treat, I don't have to care about this person. I can find somebody else, somebody better. In Jesus' day, the stakes are even higher because most likely in Jesus' day, almost every case that is being brought, that would have been an issue in the day, would be a husband divorcing his wife in a culture where women aren't able to earn a living on their own, don't have other sources or streams of income, and are still expected to take care of or raise children. Basically, to divorce your wife was to throw her out on the street with no means of provision for herself and to treat her like an object. Now, Jesus' response allows the possibility. He answers and says, not only men shouldn't divorce their wives and remarry, but women shouldn't divorce their husbands and remarry. Jesus even allows something that his questioners can't even imagine. Their question is very narrow. Can a man divorce his wife for any reason? And there were rabbis in Jesus' day whose take was, yeah, if you don't like the way your wife cooks dinner, you don't like the way she keeps house, you think you can find somebody more attractive, somebody you like better, doesn't matter. As long as you can find somebody else, all you got to do is say, I'm done with you, and move on to the next product in the line on the shelf. Jesus' response stops that. No, we don't get to treat other people like they are commodities. We probably shouldn't even treat commodities the way we often do, absent-mindedly, thinking I could always get another, rather than taking care of what we have. I want to suggest that at the heart of things is less about Jesus condemning people to hell because they couldn't make their marriage work, but Jesus calling all of us, married and unmarried, people in relationships and people who have already seen relationships end in whatever ways, that Jesus is calling all of us away from treating anybody like they're simply a commodity that can be easily replaced. It'll mean that people who are in charge of hiring don't treat their employees like you're just replaceable, I don't care about you. It will mean also that we don't treat other people like it doesn't really matter what happens to you, I've only got to look out for me and my group. It will mean that we don't treat people like they're just instruments toward my getting ahead. And it will mean we recognize that people aren't just all identical and interchangeable, but that we have commitments that we make to individual people, and that it's worth keeping and holding on to them. If I have the trouble of forgetting I've already got permanent markers and continuing to buy more and more and more and more, my goodness, how much damage could I do to somebody else, to a human being, if I treat them like they don't matter, somebody else will come along. Whether it's in a marriage relationship, in my family, in my circle of friends, in my work life, or anybody else. That cuts me to the quick. And I maybe need to hear that because, like I say, it's so easy as somebody who's married and has been married for almost 20 years. Well, I don't need to hear this teaching about Jesus because I'm just fine. This isn't about me. This is about other people. Those people. Maybe this is exactly about me because it's about more than just how you conduct a marriage, but about how I treat everybody and how I refuse to turn anybody into a commodity that can just be replaced when I want more. I want to suggest that says something important about how we use the scriptures themselves. Because one way or another, there are difficult things to be said and heard here. But the question, I think, is whether we use them to look at ourselves honestly, so that what's rotten in me can be excised out, cut out, and dealt with, or whether I'm looking to use the Bible as a weapon to get somebody else. The way the question is phrased at Jesus seems like the respectable religious people are looking for a way to use the scriptures as a weapon, right? They've got a commandment that says you're allowed to divorce your wife. They want to weaponize that into, we can tell our wives that we can throw them away, right, Jesus? Right? Because there's a Bible verse that says it, Jesus, right? And Jesus turns it back on them and says, how about you take a look at the hardness of your own hearts, that you would do that to somebody else, that you just throw somebody away? That's different than people who have suffered through really, really long, difficult times, who've done their absolute best to try and make things work, and something has happened that they can't live together anymore. That seems like it's a different kind of a situation than the question that's being posed to Jesus about, I can throw somebody away just because I want to, right, Jesus? Now, I think all of that is to say, there may be more nuance to the conversation about divorce and remarriage than even what Mark gives us. Because Jesus isn't being asked the question in the abstract, give us everything you might ever say about relationships and marriage. Jesus is being approached by people who have an agenda and who want to use their Bible as a weapon to give husbands the right to throw away wives whenever they feel like it. I want to suggest Jesus sees through it and turns it back on them. And if Jesus' words are difficult, it's difficult in particular aimed at people who are trying to use the Bible as a tool to hurt others or to be weaponized, but that Jesus isn't looking to smash or to crush or to destroy the hearts of people who are heartbroken and have lived through marriages that felt dead for a very long time and didn't know what to do about it. I want to suggest then, that maybe this is the question to be faced. Are we going to use the Bible as a scalpel or as a knife to hurt somebody? Is it a weapon or is it something to make somebody else well? A surgeon uses a scalpel, and as sharp and as cutting as it is with the intention of cutting away to get at what the real problem is. Maybe to remove an organ that is infected and in danger of killing somebody. Maybe to cut out something that's already dead. Maybe to be able to get in somewhere so they can fix or mend something. A scalpel cuts, but it's for the sake of healing. And a weapon is, I'm not using this on myself, I'm out to get somebody else. That's dangerous stuff and has a way of coming back on ourselves and hurting us when we don't anticipate it. It seems to me part of this conversation isn't just about whether there are exceptions to Jesus' teaching on divorce or not. After all, other places in the New Testament talk about things differently than this one passage. But it's also a conversation about whether we use the Scriptures, even in their sharp places, as a scalpel or as a knife to hurt somebody. Is it weaponized to hurt somebody else, or am I willing to turn this on myself first and ask God, how will you use this to cut out the rottenness in me? As somebody who reads these words of Jesus now, even though I could arguably say, well, they don't apply to me because I'm already married and I'm just fine now, this doesn't apply to me. It seems more honest to say, how can the Spirit use these words as a scalpel to get into my heart? And where are there places where I've been treating other people like commodities? Where are there places where I've treated maybe my spouse, maybe my kids, maybe my family as though they're just replaceable? Where do I treat other people in my ordinary day-by-day activities like they don't really matter, but something else, somebody else will come along and I can worry about them? That cuts me to the quick because it means I'm not off the hook when I read a passage like this, but I'm always going to need to look again and again and again. How am I hurting other people? How am I living against the vision that God intends, that we love and care for each other, that we take care of each other in permanent, long-lasting ways rather than you're only in my life as long as you're useful to me? That's a way of treating people as objects. Jesus' teaching here, even though at first on the surface it seems like it's about marriage, also cuts to something deeper, I think. And it's this very, very human way we have of loving things and using people rather than loving people and using things. This Sunday, we're going to approach this conversation. And we're going to approach it as people gathered from a whole lot of different life situations. People who are never married, people who are single, people who have come through divorce, people who are currently married and who have seen children and grandchildren married and are happy to see them thriving, people who are married themselves but have seen other loved ones go through really bad marriages at difficult times. And we're going to approach the question, hoping to use the Scriptures not as a weapon, but as a surgeon's tool for each of us. Part of how you know how you're using the Scriptures rightly is if I'm first trying to attack somebody else with my agenda, or if I'm willing to turn it on myself first and let God perform hardness of heart surgery on me before I start looking at what I think somebody else should do. Trusting those other people as well. Whatever I think they should do, they're also in God's hands, and that God's able to work in their heart, in their life, in their situation. And if their story looks different from mine, I'm going to have to entrust that God's the surgeon who's working in them, just like God needs to work in me. This Sunday, join us for conversation as we seek to use the Scriptures not as a weapon, but as a scalpel. See you Sunday.